Hi, this is David Simkins, sitting with Marc Zicree for the Zicree Simkins podcast, and our guest today is Donald P. Borchers.
Hello, hello.
So the first thing we want to start off with is this Saturday night. We're recording this on a Wednesday. This Saturday night on the Sci-Fi Channel, you have a film premiering, a remake of sorts.
I've remade the Stephen King short story, Children of the Corn. That's not a remake of the original film, which I also produced. It's a remake of the short story itself. In the first film, George Goldsmith was brought on by the Hal Roach Studios, who owned the option rights to the King's short story, to develop a screenplay after King had written one. And then a young executive at New World by the name of, I think it was David Simkins, brought me the script when I was an executive there, and I had not seen the King script because Hal Roach was excited about the Goldsmith draft. So they sent that over, and I had not read the short story. So I knew we had an option to do a Stephen King picture. I was told this was the script, and I greenlit the picture. I think after I made the movie, I read the short story. I think it was sometime around the time where Stephen King was on Good Morning America saying something like, well, I'm sure these filmmakers will go on to do something good, being a very decent man.
But you harbored this urge for many years to, after you read the short story, to, I guess in quotes, get it right.
Really, only for the last 5 years, where it really hit me over the head more than anything. And I was aware for almost the 20 years until this point in time I'm telling you about in 2003, of the criticism of the picture and of the criticism of changing the ending, Hollywoodizing it, destroying the relationship between Bert and Vicky. I really didn't care because I knew I made a successful film, and it was the film I was trying to make. What happened to me was in 2003, like the rest of the country, I'm watching George Bush say, essentially, that our country is going to go to war, which looked to me, essentially, and I'm not saying that anybody said this, I'm just telling you my perspective. It looked to me like the United States was launching a holy war in the Middle East. And I was against it. I didn't think it was a good idea. I knew a lot of people would die, and not really for great reasons. And I kept thinking, why is a religion such a way that they would tell people to kill? And then it hit me. Well, that's the point of the story. That's King's point. His thesis underneath the great drama is, how can there be a religion where they tell you to kill? And to make his point, in my interpretation of his story, he chooses the most innocent of innocents to lead. I just thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was time.
So tell us the difference between the original, aside from being much more faithful to the original story, which is a pretty grim tale. The differences between, and I don't think we're letting any spoilers out of the bag, because if people want to, they can just go read the short story.
Yeah, read the short story. That's it. I filmed it.
The differences between this current version and the original version, the film.
The original film is a story that's done in movie language on 10 reels, where each reel is about 8 to 10 minutes long, and that's how movies tend to break down in Hollywood for the last 100 years. It's changing now because of video, but you'd either have a 10-reel or a 12-reel film. So the first difference is, in the first film, when you would watch reels 4, 5, and 6, nothing happens. Bert just walks around town for 30 minutes or something. It's boring. When we were screening the film to test before we scored it.
This is the 1980.
The 1984.
84 version.
People would fall asleep during these reels. I mean, the heads of the studio watching it, we'd be waking them up. And they say, this film doesn't work, and we'd be saying, no, I promise you, it works. It's flawed. It doesn't meet the litmus test of a good film. But hey, I watch Steven Seagal movies. Come on. There's a market for lots of stuff. You don't have to make a good film to make money with a movie.
And just to sort of put us back in time, this was the new world that had been sold by Roger Corman, bought by two entertainment lawyers, Harry Sloan, Larry Cuppen,
and Larry Thompson.
And they were looking for product. And this was the summer of, or the time of, Christine and The Dead Zone, and King was huge business in
Yeah, it was March
bookstores.
1983. You brought me the script. I was told that we were going to go into production on the third sequel to The Howling. And the late John Daly was involved, and I don't think it's any secret that he was once described to me as a person that if I was to shake his hand, I should then count my fingers. Um, Knowing that reputation, I was strongly advising New World not to go into business with this company. And they said, well, but it's a great little horror film. It's going to be a moneymaker. I said, well, just give me a little bit of time to find a horror film. And while I was looking, you, David Simkins, found it.
And how much did it cost to make originally?
the The cash that I was given, which paid for the whole film, was $1.6 million.
And how much did it make for the company back then?
Oh gosh, I've got a plaque from the RIAA that certified 100,000 units sold, and at the time the wholesale price for video was about $49. So the word was that the video deal paid for the negative and for the cost of the theatrical distribution. Theatrically, it went out. It was the number one grosser for the year. It did like I can't remember the number, but it was tens of millions. And then overseas, it was about 50% of that. Harry Sloan once sat me down and said it was the difference between New World continuing in its existence or going out of business.
So this new one, you wrote it?
Well, Stephen King wrote the story, and he wrote a first draft script. I thought that the story structure was sound, but it wasn't sufficient to complete the length of a feature film. I then found scenes that were original that he had wrote in his script, and I wove them back into the short story. I had to bridge maybe less than 20% of with new material, and I did not this time introduce a single new character.
Shot in Iowa? How long? How long did it take you?
It took me 5 years to shoot it. Principal photography lasted 20 days of first unit photography and 3 days of second unit photography.
And your cast is?
David Anders. He is a star. He's naturally talented.
And most people know David from his turn on Alias. He played a character named Sark.
I had only known him from the small part he had on Heroes. So when the casting director suggested it to me, the first thing I say is, well, I don't want to go and have to deal with a Brit doing an American accent. I've had that. I've been there, done that. You know, this is a small show, got to get it fast. She goes, oh, you're going to like this guy. And I go, why? He goes, because he's not British. I go, really? I said, this guy can act. And boy, could he act. I mean, I remember when we were doing Two Moon Junction, and we had a rain cover day. And we had to switch to pull the scene that was shooting inside next week up to today, which means that an actress, Academy Award-winning actress Louise Fletcher, which had not yet started on our film because she wasn't due to start until next week, had to come in and start literally with like 2 hours of a phone call. Louise, can you get in right now for our cover set? It's pouring down rain. She has a 3-page monologue scene. Between the time she reported to wardrobe and makeup and the time she went to the set, she had her 3-page monologue scene. I saw David Anders do this every day for 20 days. I'd give him a 5-page, I'd give him a 3-page, a 6-page. He'd hit makeup, he'd hit wardrobe, and he'd have the lines by the time we got to the set. I can't tell you how impressed I am with him.
And then your co-star, Candace McClure.
Candace McClure was great. We actually got her SAG card. This is the first show she's ever done in the Screen Actors Guild. She has been working in Canada. And the Screen Actors Guild is a United States collective bargaining organization. And in being a Canadian citizen, it's not something that's ever come up in her life. It's her first U.S. picture. And I was really proud to be the person to be able to give her a SAG card. What a trooper. I was concerned that David had an ability to learn lines because of our first day of rehearsal. I told them that I really wanted it up to performance, which is kind of unusual. But I had a really short schedule, and I was the line producer, the executive producer, the director, the fourth casting director, the paralegal. I mean, just way too many jobs. So I didn't really want to invest myself with a lot of rehearsal. So I said to them on Friday before our 3-day weekend, when you come in on Monday, I want the first 18 pages off book. And I did this because I wanted David to work over the weekend. Even though he's naturally gifted and talented, I was going to change the way he did business. Candace comes in Monday morning. She's got those 18 pages down. I mean, wow.
And this is kind of a grueling shoot because I mean it is the two of them in a car, uh, digging at each other. It's a marriage in trouble, and then
It's the first half of the movie.
they hit the town, and it is sort of a nonstop kind of run and gun, and uh, you know, you're shooting fast, shooting a lot of setups. You're doing a lot of setups, right? I mean,
The best day we had to measure setups was two camera 85 setups. I have a mantra in my head is action equals cuts, tension equals cuts. And so when I want to do chase scenes and action scenes, I want to get a lot of setups. I want to copy John McTiernan and really have that die-hard kind of fluidity. When I'm doing the dialogue and the drama, I don't really want to cut. So, I mean, there's one day on the show where I did 8 pages and I did 4 setups. And then there's other days where I did, 2 pages and I did 85 setups. I just wanted to make sure by the time that the whole show was done that I'd have at least 600 or 700 setups to take to the editing room, and I did.
We talked about how the New World version came to fruition, but this is interesting that in the old days you would have studios like New World creating the genre films along these lines, but now Sci-Fi is doing such an enormous number of these kind of films, and so it's a different model, and it's an interesting model, particularly in terms of how it's financed. So, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Sci-Fi has a formula. That's correct. Its formula is not mutually exclusive to what New World was doing, because Sci-Fi doesn't really service out any of the genres that New World hit. Mm-hmm. New World hit the horror genre hard. They hit the exploitation genres hard. Sci-Fi has a model. Their model is 2 to 4 million people, optimistically, each Saturday night, who want to have an action experience. They want to make action pictures. They like their action pictures to have some kind of iconic celebrity, like Sherlock Holmes or somebody, and they like monsters like King Kongs. I mean, if you want to sell the Sci-Fi Channel a picture tomorrow, bring them Sherlock Holmes meets King Kong, and you'll sign on the dotted line. That's what they're looking for. They have this formula that they follow. So because of the formula, all they can do is generate the same kind of picture in different ways. And it's a business for them. And it's a business that's more like a business of widgets than a business of filmmaking. My picture came through and got immediately rejected because it didn't meet any of the standards. And the people who ran the Sci-Fi Channel I found to be of the highest integrity, very knowledgeable, excellent at what they do, turning a profit at what they do. But I find myself thinking, gosh, I'd like to watch this show on the Sci-Fi Channel. How can I convince everybody it'd be a good idea knowing that it doesn't fit in their business model at all? So I had a frank conversation with one of their executives who explained how they had tried some horror films. And I had suggested that the model they use for the sci-fi structure is not transferable to horror, because the horror model is more analogous to the ride you take on a roller coaster. So in the sci-fi model, the first thing they like to do with the action is grab you. In fact, they call it a 4-minute opening grabber, like grab them. Well, now think about what happens when you ride a roller coaster. The first thing they like to do is nothing. And for the longest time. And it's true, think of some of the scariest movies you've ever seen, like Fatal Attraction. Michael Douglas walks around his house for 20 minutes. And then goes to a party. It's the right way to do a horror film. So naturally, my film doesn't fit. So I thought I would try and make an alternative argument to convince them that it should be programmed there. And I said, well, let me just get it right. I mean, people essentially know around town, and I don't think I'm telling any secrets out of school, that 6 months after you deliver the finished film, you guys pay a whopping $750,000 for the rights. Well, knowing that, how could you ever pray to ever get an original Stephen King film on your station? And then they said, well, now, you've made an interesting argument. And because they're intelligent people and they listen to debate, they don't just, rule you out. They listen to what you're saying and they factor it. After really kicking it around and thinking about it, they went, it's not in our business plan. doesn't fit into anything we're doing, but it makes a lot of sense. It's the right thing to do. So they gave us a green light. And that really worked out very well for me. Because I didn't fit into their formula, they didn't make me try. So they actually let me make my film. And even though Fox Television Studios financed the movie, they actually made my film. And this may shock you to hear that the script I submitted to David Madden in 2005 August was the script that I shot in September 2009. And the only things that got changed in the script were things that I decided to change because of the exigencies of production. Like, there's a big chase sequence in the third act of my script that I had to redefine it and rewrite it and restage it and do everything differently. But nobody said I had to do that. I figured out I had to do it because it would have taken at least 3 or 4 more days to shoot that sequence, and I only had the 20 days that I had. Now, the other part of what you were asking is what's happened to these genre films. Well, the horror genre has been adopted as the staple of Lionsgate Films, which makes that the leading independent studio. New Line used to carry the banner for it, but they were subsumed into Warner's. And it's an interesting strategy, because Warner's new strategy essentially is just make 4 big pictures a year. What do we need a little independent division for? What do we need it? It's just a bunch of work, a bunch of overhead, a bunch of salaries, a bunch of infrastructure. We make all our big money on Batman. Let's just do 4 of them a year. So they're not really going to be in the game, New Line, anymore. Sony's got their genre label, which Clint Culpepper runs, Screen Gems. So the horror genres has been subsumed into the majors, with Dimension Films, Screen Gems, Lionsgate. You can still get a genre deal at New Line. That's really where they've ended up. The majors saw the business in it and took it.
So how did Fox enter into? You mentioned Fox a moment ago in terms of being the sort of the production entity of this.
Well,
project?
when I saw that I wanted to remake this because of the Iraq War situation, I just sat down and wrote it on spec, and I went through a process of finishing a script, calling 1 or 2 writers that I had worked with in the past that I respected, and sending them the script and getting their comments, and then writing it again, addressing their comments, so that by the time I was done with the script, it wouldn't get comments. So I spent about 18 months on it, and maybe did 20, 30 drafts. And I didn't want to show somebody a first draft. I just wanted to shoot it. So it was on me to get it ready to shoot. So when it was done, I sent it off to Bob Weinstein at Dimension Films. They own the rights. Now I'm here to tell you, Bob Weinstein has seen the film, has told me it's the best thing the Sci-Fi Channel has ever gotten. They don't deserve it for the money they paid, but still has never read the script that I've submitted to him in 2003. Lucky for me that New World Pictures in the late 80s bifurcated its library, wherein it split into 2 pieces. And how it affected me, without boring you with a long legal description, is Dimension Films has the right to remake Children of the Corn for movie theaters. New World Pictures, which in 1997 merged into Fox Television, has the right to remake Children of the Corn for TV. Now, it only took me 18 months to find that out after I submitted the script to Bob Weinstein. But after a year and a half, and I found that out in 2005, then I submitted the script to Fox. David Madden had never met me, didn't know who I was from Adam, but we had a mutual friend, Rob Keneally, an agent at CAA, who suggested that it would be worth reading. David read it that night. He called me the next morning, said, you know, I might tell you after we pitch it to some of the networks, they might say things like, we want to rewrite this with a network writer. He said, they might take you on a terrible journey you don't want to go on. He said, but I like your script. Let's make your movie. He goes, and I'm telling you, I'm not even in the TV movie business anymore. That business is dead and buried, but let's do it. And what a mensch. I mean, without David Madden, this film's never made.
So was it his suggestion to then take it over to Sci-Fi, or was that...
What David did was he brought it everywhere in town that a company like Fox can make some real money. And everywhere in town not only thought it was a good idea, they thought it was so good, they bragged to David how they already had a Stephen King project in the works. And if we wanted to get on deck, if you will, in the batter's circle, we could maybe be the 3rd or 4th one on deck. He apparently is a prolific writer. I don't know if people know this about the man. He writes a lot. And so David turned up one offer for us at Lifetime. And he said, now, you're not going to like this offer, except it's good money for MOW, and the MOW business is pretty much dead and buried. And Lifetime and only a few other companies really carry the banner for it anymore. So I went in and I pitched it to Lifetime. And it was funny. I mean, sitting in the room making the pitch, I brought in a poster. I showed the executive. He's listening everywhere. He's taking notes. I've got him on the edge of the seat telling my story. And when it's done, he goes, wow, that is a story. Let me kick it around with here. I'm telling you, we're serious. We want to do horror films. We want to put them out on Halloween. We want to do a Halloween horror film every year. Stephen King, it'd be great for us to inaugurate with it. We pay somewhere between $6 and $8 million for MOWs, not like 750,000. And I was so excited. 2 weeks later, we get the offer, and I read it, and they suggest that maybe if they didn't kill their parents, and were maybe nicer, and the business with Vicky getting killed, that really shouldn't happen in the short story Vicky thing, and Bert really maybe make him a minor character, because Vicky really could be her story. It'd be so great. So I said, I think these are terrific notes, and I would like to make that movie. I don't think we should involve Stephen King in the project, though, because it doesn't have anything to do with what he's written. And I mean, come on, how wrong is wrong? And they then passed on it because they wanted all of that to be their Stephen King movie. So I was flattered that we got an offer and flattered that they were interested, but it was crazy. It was just crazy. So that was as far as he could take it, and then he stopped. The reason Fox has never done a deal with the Sci-Fi Channel before is, I might have mentioned, they pay $750 6 months after delivery. So David said, really, it's your call, Don. What do you want to do? You want to hang around and wait for a year or two? You want to take a run at the Lifetime deal? What do you want to do? I said, I want to take a run at the Sci-Fi Channel. He goes, you can't make any money doing that. I said, at least I can make my movie.
So was Fox underwriting the budget, and how
Fox,
were they making back their money? Because obviously the budget was above $750.
Yeah, Fox. I mean, it's no big secret. In order for the Sci-Fi to pay you $750, you have to have a $2 million film. Film costs $2 million. Fox fully financed the picture. What happened was, I brought them the offer from the Sci-Fi Channel. All of their TV movies are sold by themselves. They have Fox Foreign Sales Department. So the foreign sales people wrote an estimate on what they figured the foreign would be worth. The U.S. video people wrote an estimate on what the video would be worth, and then they had the offer for U.S. TV. And based on that, we were not greenlit. And I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, the problem is the video numbers. They don't work. I said, what do you need for video? And they told me the number they needed for video. And I said, and then they told me why the deal didn't work. I said, well, the way I could go to a network, I said, could I sell your video outside of Fox Video? And the guy who ran the video department, David Bixler, I've known he was the executive producer on my film Desire in Hell and Sunset Motel, so you can imagine I've known him for a while. He explained it to me outright. He goes, Don, I think you got a great project. I think you got a great title. I think you got a moneymaker. He says, our problem is bandwidth. He says, I've got big pictures and output deals with most of the major suppliers. He goes, we have big titles. We don't have room. We just don't have room. If you bring me a title that can, you get the idea. I'll stop there. So I went out and solicited every company that sells videos, and it was pretty much a no-brainer. The company that sold the original Children of the Corn wanted the sequel. They wanted it more than anybody else, and they outbid everybody else for it. That's Anchor Bay Video, and what a great company! Not a good company, a great company. They're smart enough to have divisions inside their company, so you don't talk to one buyer for everything. Inside their company, they have a horror division, a specialty label, and these people get it. I mean, they know where to advertise, where to publicize, who their market is, how to service it, what they're looking for. I mean, really professional people.
I got a question for you. So Stephen King would not have been happy with his name on the Lifetime version of this film, but his name is on this version of the film, right?
Well, he is accorded the story by credits, Stephen King,
right? And
the Writers Guild had an arbitration, and they affirmed the submitted credit, which was screenplay by Donald P. Borchers and Stephen King, and King I personally made a DVD, sent it to him. He received it and got notice of the writing credits. And at that time, he has the right to elect to arbitrate again and submit the way he thinks the credit should be, the right to remove his name, to request his name removed, and if that's not granted, the right to request a pseudonym like Alan Smithy or something. He got the credits and he affirmed them passively.
One thing that I find impressive also, Don, when I hear you talk about all this is the balance between you as an artist, as the writer, director, and as the businessman. In other words, to make the art happen, you have to really be on your toes in terms of the numbers, in terms of the business, in terms of playing the corporate, game. And that's fascinating. I'm very interested in how you've come to being so adroit in both of these aspects, particularly the business aspect as it services your art. So
Most of the films I produce, I set up the deals. And most of the deals I set up is because I pretty much targeted where it was I wanted to do business, that I thought they would want me to do business. And then I did a lot of listening to what it was that they wanted to buy. And then I would make sure I would have an offering that fit all of their financial parameters. With this project, I originally wrote this as like a $20 million picture. I saw this as a very big screen movie. After I realized Dimension Films wasn't even going to read my script, well, then I thought, I better reconceive the size and scope and the way to produce it, and come up with a new business plan, which essentially takes the same drama and scope down the size. I'll give you an example. If you want to shoot a big movie and money's no object, you could build an office and it could have 4 walls and be completely furnished. If you, on a short budget, you may decide not to build the second or third or fourth wall, which then limits the amount of lights that you need. It limits the amount of time that you need to move the lights around in those kinds of decisions. That's what I mean by changing the scope of the production. It doesn't change the script. It just changes what you see from the script.
You told me this a long time ago, and I'm fascinated by this story, but one of your first money-making ventures as a child, and then that to me sort of defines who you are in terms of how you get things done.
Well, I remember when my dad was running the Navy Exchange at the sub base in New London, Connecticut. We lived in a darling little community called Norwich, and one weekend we were out visiting our next door neighbors who were camping. And that was how they spent some of their summer vacation time. And we drove a couple hours in Connecticut. And when we were driving back, we came up to a toll bridge. And it was 1 quarter. Between my mother and my father, they didn't have a quarter between them. We didn't have a lot of money in our family. We were never broke. We were always well off, but we weren't ahead of the game. So this really weighed on me, what the value of 25 cents was. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and it really hit me over the head hard. And then I started first grade right after that, and I was given a nickel every day to buy milk. And I didn't really fancy milk. So by the end of the first week, I found myself with 5 nickels. At the end of that week, my mother took me across the street where they had, I guess it would be the forerunner of a 7-Eleven. It's you can imagine the early 1960s, a place that you could get beer or candy or milk or whatever, just in Connecticut, just a little corner shop. So there was a hole in the fence at our school right across the street from this place. So the next week during our lunch hour, I now had like 7 nickels. I went across the street by myself. I bought a fistful of candy and put it in my pocket. And everybody in the school wanted some. Now, I was surprised to find that some of these children were sent to school with more than 5 cents for their milk. Well, I quickly figured out who they were and what kind of candy they liked. And I was getting 5 cents candy sold for 10 cents to 6-year-olds who didn't know the difference and just wanted their candy. I started to make about $5 a week doing this. And I remember this one Saturday afternoon, my mother drove us to the local forerunner of Walmart, which was called Mr. Biggs. And we parked at Mr. Biggs, and we went inside, and I saw me a creepy crawler machine. And I was in heaven. But the thing was $8.50, and my mother couldn't afford it. I had $10 in my pocket. I'd been selling candy for a few months. She thought I stole the money. boy, was that a rigmarole to try and explain my little business. So I was on the carpet with my father. He thought it was brilliant. How can we expand? you know, but he didn't like the idea of me being 6 and crossing the street. So I agreed that I would never again cut through that fence and cross the street and buy that gum, because it didn't really matter, because at this point I had a creepy crawler machine. So I used to make custom spiders and worms and snakes and things for kids. And I figured out how much the goopy goo cost and how much it would be amortized over each one and how much to charge. And I had a good price model, because the gumball machine where you would put in your 5 cents, you could turn one of those machines. They had like 20 of them next to each other. One of them just had little plastic cups with these rubber spiders stuck in there anyway, and they were going for a quarter. So at 20 cents, I'm a discount.
So college, Notre Dame, you graduate, you move straight to Los Angeles?
When I finished Notre Dame, I had just come off a terrible episode of pneumonia. And all I could think of was, I'm 21, I've just graduated college, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my future. Maybe I could make it out to Florida and be a bartender, or Hawaii, because it was so cold in Indiana. And I had just gotten pneumonia, and I had finished school a semester early, so it's January in the dead of winter. So I sent my resume off to a couple places to learn bartending in Florida, and I got accepted for my summer job full time. I was working for a travel company called Cartan Travel, doing group tours. I was the schmuck on the bus with the microphone, and the guy checks you in the hotel and takes care of your bags and everything. And they said, "You want to go to Hawaii? We got a permanent position for you out there." I said, "Great." I went out to Hawaii, and I was making big money right out of school. It was unbelievable. You got 25% commission on anything you could sell, and I could sell. I was selling Don Ho show tickets. You'd bring 30 people into the Don Ho show, and you have an envelope for $500. That's an hour's work. And unbelievable money, really, really good business. And then Cartan got bought by another company. I want to say Avco Corporation, but I'm not sure I've got that correct. I think it's Avco Corporation. And everything changed. They found out that in addition to the $200 a week they were paying us, we were making commissions. And they thought, that should be our money. Well, it wasn't worth working there anymore, because you went from making almost $2,000 a week to making $200 a week. And really there was no reason to sell anything, because the company was making it all. And after that, the company went down kind of fast in flames. I don't think they made it another few more years after that. While I was there, about 4 months into it, I met a fascinating man from South Bend, Indiana, whose dad owns the largest bakery there, the Bussey Bakery. And his name's Bill Bussey. What a great guy. I mean, free thinker, entrepreneur. He'd made his life's career there. I want to say Bill's about 20 years older than me, but I'm not sure. He's significantly older than me. And I thought of him as a mentor. And one night he sat me down and he goes, things are changing here, and they're changing fast. He goes, "You're 21 years old. You're going to be 22 in a few months. So what are you going to do with your life? Why aren't you apprenticing in a rich business right now and making your way to the top? Why are you wasting all of your apprentice years?" Literally the next day after that dinner, I heeded Bill Bussey's advice, and I got applications to the film schools at Texas at Austin, NYU, USC, UCLA, Columbia. There was a total of 7. And I think I got accepted to almost all of them, but USC was the one I chose to go to. And I heard it was impossible to get in, and that they were taking a ratio of like 1 out of 50 or whatever. And I couldn't figure out how I got in. I'm a B student. I don't have great grades, but they were trying to round off the pack. And the 2 things I had in my advantage, I was told, because I asked after I got in. I didn't ask for a scholarship. That was a big deal to them. And I was well-rounded in business, and that completed a fit for them, that they didn't have any business majors applying. So I was a business major who was paying his own way. I guess that was good enough to get me in USC Film School. I did real well on the GREs, but I never thought of myself as a great student. I came out here then for that. The company Avco, I'm sure it was Avco now that bought Cartan, because I remember now, my boss was a guy named Bob Agard, really nice guy. I mean, and what a party animal the guy was. Till he used to have these outrageous parties. He bought a a place in Chicago, a townhouse, that's basement was one of those secret underground runs for
The bootleggers?
the bootleggers. And he had tunnels that went to hospitals and everything. So he turned his basement into a nightclub. You know, it had like foosball and pinball and a bar. And whenever you were laid over in Cartan, you know, it's like, let's go to Agard's house. So Agard's out here in L.A. running carte blanche travel services. He's one floor above Avco Embassy's purchase of Embassy Pictures. Avco bought Embassy, Joe Levine's company. So I go out to drinks with Agard one night because I'm out here at USC, and I'm in my 4th or 5th day of school at this point. And he goes, well, you know, I got some friends downstairs at Embassy Pictures. When the time's right and you're out of school, you're ready to meet them, give me a call. So the next day I go to class at USC. It's a lecture. And I'm a little lost because I am a business student. I am a B business student, and this is a graduate course in filmmaking, and there's 200 people here, and they all seem to know what's going on. So I raise my hand. The teacher gets upset at me. He goes, put your hand down. I said, I have a question before you move on. He goes, hold your question until after class. I had never been in a 200-person lecture. I went to Notre Dame. We had like these, you know, like these 12 people and a teacher. You talk to each other. You learn things. You ask questions, get answers. I didn't know about this mass education business. So, I mean, I'm really frustrated at this point. I can't follow. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on, and I'm not on scholarship. I made a lot of money in Hawaii, and I'm paying my own way in college. I made money that fast in Hawaii that I could pay college. So I just said to myself, this is not good value for your money. You're paying and you're lost. You can't follow what's going on. So I reasserted myself and I raised my hand again. He goes, what? I said, I want to ask you a question about what's going on because I'm confused. He goes, if you're having that kind of problem, I said, or maybe I don't belong in this program. He said, well, then go see the register and get a refund. I picked up my books. I walked to the registrar. I told him the name of the professor. I told him what they instructed me to do. I said, best for me to get all my money back now. And they said, you're right, because after 5 days, you don't get a full refund at USC. So they gave me a check, and I left the university. I started a production company. I met a guy who was working at Toys R Us, and he said he wrote a script called Coast to Coast. We wrote up an option agreement. We then sent it to William Morris and asked Ron Howard to direct it. We offered him, I think, $100,000. And they started to negotiate with us. We then offered the lead to Amy Irving, and they started to negotiate with us. I then asked Bob Agard to introduce me to the guy downstairs at the company. I said, there's a movie I'd like to produce. I said, I'm pretty sure Ron Howard's going to direct. No, I'm sorry. I said Ron Howard. My memory, Tony Bill, because he was a Notre Dame grad. It's Tony Bill. I said, I'm negotiating with Tony Bill to direct and negotiating with Amy Irving to star. That was true. We were negotiating. What I later learned in life is agents will always negotiate with you because while they're negotiating with you, whatever you say, they will then take to the person they really want to do the deal with and say, this guy over here just said this. Can you do better? So negotiating ain't a hard thing to do with anybody. I find out later. So I'm negotiating this, and they introduced me to a woman who, quite a character, named Blossom Khan. And I tell her about this project and everything, and she makes a few phone calls, quickly realizes the whole thing is like never going to happen, the script's terrible, and nobody's going to really do it or whatever. But I got to meet all the executives in the company at that point. So they kind of felt sorry for me and offered me a pity job as a junior accountant in their participations department, reporting to Roger Burledge, who had just been named treasurer. And Roger throws me this bone. I'm dealing with all these people who are sitting with literally pencils and those green graph papers. And they're keeping the ledgers for all the outside producer statements. And then 3-hole punching it and putting them in binders. Now, I had just come from college, and I had learned Fortran 4. So that was on my resume, foreign languages, Fortran 4. I could speak Fortran. And I don't know if you remember those things. Those punch cards, and you'd stick them in one card at a time and punch each card. And then when you wanted to run the program, you'd take the stack of cards, and then you feed through. So I convinced them that they should automate the whole producers department. So they put me in charge of that project. So I now am named project coordinator at AVCO Embassy, and that's my new job. And I started to think of a bunch of projects for them to do, and that's how I got started at AVCO. My assistant on that project was a grad student on her summer internship at Yale, Gail Katz.
Gail Katz, who now works with Wolfgang Peterson, and is
one of the biggest producers in Hollywood.
Right, right.
Yeah, I'd like to get her to return my calls. That's a joke. She's not on return my calls. She's a wonderful person. Her dad. It was great when she was an intern there. Her dad owned, I want to say Solly's. It was the little deli on 4th in Wilshire, and so it'd be great. We'd go there for free food.
So what was the first film you got to do? I mean, when Coast to Coast fell apart, and so then you're over at AVCO. So how did you manage to turn the trick?
They were financing a project at Elliot Kastner. I think when they invented the expression "shake his hand and count your fingers," that's the guy they were talking about. He had put together a deal where NBC was buying a first run on a Susan Anton feature directed by Joe Sargent called Golden Girl, a 2-part movie of whatever, 2 2-hour pieces. And they sent me out. They said, go audit their books. Go see if they're being honest. I kind of think they just were being nice to me that day, thinking, we really have caught up on his computer project. He's really done the company a service here. He wants to learn more about production. He'll get some experience. Well, I thought they actually wanted me to audit the books. So I went out and I started to audit the books. And I'm looking at the books here, and I meet the accountant. Fabulous, wonderful British lady. I mean, a ladies' lady. I mean, classy, elegant. Her name's Beverly something. And I was wondering what her experiences were. It's virtually the first film she's ever been a production accountant on. And she's not a peer in my age group. She'd be more of a mentor to my age group. So I'm thinking, well, what have you done your whole life? We're having these guys. She's an actress. She knows the producer. She needed a gig. So I'm thinking, maybe I should take a hard look at these books. So I start to ask for some petty cash envelopes. So the first thing I think is, well, if anybody's going to steal money, it's going to be the producer. So let me see his petty cash first. I pull up his petty cash, and it just looks at business as usual. Receipts for restaurants, the name of the person that were there. Here's his airline ticket. You can see it was used. He flew here. Right. Now I'm auditing other things, and I get the bills from the travel agencies. Well, I think you might see where this one's going. Yeah, all of those airline tickets were paid for by the company on invoice, used by the traveler. Then the traveler claimed reimbursement of the full fare of the ticket. They then started to argue that no, it was 2 different trips, this and that. And I said, well, it's interesting. I just completed an 8-month hitch in Hawaii where, among other things, I got certified as a travel agent. I'm a member of ASTA. At the bottom of airline tickets, there's these funny letters that are next to each other. And on this ticket, it said AGTNOREF. And I know that to mean that it's purchased by an agent, AGT, and that there's no NO refund, REF, to the holder of the ticket. That agent may or may not have extended credit to their customer when they issued the ticket. So they're not in the business of giving a customer a ticket on credit and then letting them go cash it for cash. The cash has to come back to the agent. So it's impossible on an agent in that year, it was at that time, impossible on an agent-issued ticket to be involved with it personally, financially. So now I start to count the tickets. I mean, we're not talking 1,000, 2,000. It is like $50,000. I mean, first class, $4,000 a pop, dozen tickets. I mean, it's a lot of money. Which then begged the question, perhaps there are other things we should look at. It got so bad, and we were finding so much problems, that it was requested and agreed to that we could go to the producer's rented house and do a physical inspection. Whereupon we found all of the original wardrobe of the show in the closets. And what a great way to make enemies right out of the gate on your first job in Hollywood.
I was going to say, this is not going to endear you to certain people.
But in terms of a learning curve, it really was brilliant. Because I got to start to work with people. They never took me off the project because I inaugurated the discoveries. After they brought the really smart people on who had experience in auditing and stuff, I got to sit in the background and watch them work. And I learned so much. And that really was the point of your question is, whether you're cutting your teeth. Cutting my teeth on that was a big deal. Right off of that, I meet Deborah Hill, who John Carpenter was in business with, and they had just made a deal for them to make The Fog for us. And Deborah was explaining on how Halloween, Mustafa Khan just gave him $300,000. She put it in a checking account, and every time they needed something, she'd write a check. She saw how much money they had left, and that's how much money they had left. And that's how they made their movie. What do they need an accountant for? She couldn't figure it out. It just wasn't there. Well, I was sporting a fashion that I may have been responsible for starting at the time, where I would keep the top 2 buttons of my shirt undone, wear the skinniest tie you could wear, and have it start at the second button. Well, Deborah thought that was adorable, and she said, well, what about that guy over there with the cute tie? Well, he can be our accountant. And Roger goes, actually, he'd probably like to. He goes, Donald, come here. I want you to meet Deborah Hill. We hit it off. It was like friendship at first talk. We had a connection. When I finished being the production accountant on The Fog, she actually offered me to be the president of the company that she and John Carpenter were running, Hilltopper Productions. I took the offer back to Bob Ramey, who at the time was running Avco Embassy, and he said, if Deborah Hill and John Carpenter think you're good enough to run their department, we want to get you up here in the production department. So instead, he pulled me out of accounting and put me in production.
So, Avco Embassy, New World Pictures, you're at New World for how long? Oh, I'm sorry, started with Sandy Howard. You worked with Sandy.
Yeah, after Avco, I had a bad experience my last year there. I had been doing real well, and I got to the point where the company was for sale. They were losing their key executives, and I was getting promoted very quickly through the food chain. And I was now in charge of physical below-the-line production on a slate of pictures. I had almost $100 million of checks I signed that year. I was 23 years old. Reporter did an article. They called me a baby mogul. This guy's running the studio over there. So the head of the studio, Bob Ramey, decided that a friend of his in exhibition, I think his name was Vrummy Schnitzer, should come and be my boss. But since he had never worked in production, he would like me to train him. I said, let me get this right, Bob. I said, I know I'm only 23, and I know I got a lot to learn. But if I'm smart enough to train my boss, I think I'm smart enough to at least ask for the same money he's getting. He said, well, that'll never happen. I said, well, then you have my resignation right now. And I left, and I didn't have a better job, and I didn't have anything to go on to. I wasn't going to get walked on like that. That's not who I am. Maybe it's cost me a lot of money in my life, but it's just not going to happen. So I went out and I started to do the independent thing, and my nickname became Captain Budget. I applied for a few jobs as assistant director and production manager around town at a few places, and Frank Capra Jr. took me on an eye for an eye, which he pretty much had to, because what happened was I was the captain of the Notre Dame karate team when I was a senior at Notre Dame. And I wanted to stay in shape, so I joined June Chong's club on Wilshire Boulevard. June was friends with Chuck Norris. And I was working out there, and June fancied the movie business. And so he found out I was working for Avco Embassy, and it didn't matter what my job was. I worked at a movie company. I got to meet Chuck Norris. He wants to do a movie. June's got the script. So he introduced me to Chuck Norris. What a great guy. Chuck says, Jim Bruner wrote a script. We really like it. You should read it. I read it. I really liked it. It's called An Eye for an Eye. I sent it to Bob Ramey. He really liked it. And so I asked if I could produce it. He said, you're 23 years old. You don't know anything. You can't produce this. And in fact, next week, we're going to hire somebody that you're going to report to, and you're going to train him. So Frank Capra saw what was going on. And he had a thing with the girl who had just written Black Stallion, Jeannie, and he was trying to get gold divers done. And it was never going to happen. And he had an office, and he was next to mine, and we'd talk every day. And he saw that I was getting good progress on my eye for an eye thing. I was like, Frank, I'm out of here. Bob just screwed me with the Vrummy Schnitzer thing, and I'm pissed. And the last thing I'm going to do is just pack my bags and leave. He says, before you do, he says, could you put me up for producing Eye for an Eye? He goes, they need a producer, right? I said, okay, you're a nice guy. You've been nice to me. So now I'm on the street and I don't have a job, and I call him up. I go, "Can you get me a job on that show, Eye for an Eye?" He goes, "I'm not only going to get you a job, get you the same job I had when I learned how to work movies. You're going to be the second assistant director on the set. That way you'll have a first and a second that'll teach you the business, and you can follow their instructions and everything." Now the real joke is, by the time it's the fourth week of the show, okay, the first assistant director has to go to what do you call it? A medical doctor's appointment that he has to go to. Like, it's everybody understands he's not going to be on the set for 4 hours, and nobody has a problem with it. The second assistant director, I don't know what the issue was, but he wasn't on the set. So they say, "Don, run the set." I'm like, "I don't know what I don't know what. I don't know anything. Why am I running this set?" They give me a walkie-talkie, they give me a belt, and I'm the first assistant director for 4 hours. What a mess that was. I was so unqualified and so not ready. But it's funny. Everything I've learned like that. Just falling into it, getting dirty, figuring it out. And it's been so prolific amount of those experiences. I have learned a great deal.
So Children of Corn, the Corn is going to air in the next few days, and so what's after that? What are you going to do after that? Where's your heart taking you?
I've done films that I'm very proud of, like Ken Russell's Crimes of Passion and David Mamet's Water Engine and Zalman King's Two Moon Junction. I've done some really good work. These films were all profitable, but none of them broke out into blockbuster money. I did, a little genre movie called Angel. It made blockbuster money. So I want to revisit the popular genre, and to that end, I've created a piece that takes a retired cop, and essentially a retired jewel thief, if you will, and pits them on a mission that they have to go onto together, being lifelong enemies. And it's got a catchy title and a great concept, and as soon as I put it out to the market, I'll find out what people think.
What's your advice for, this is a big loaded question, but to anyone listening to this, how do I make it in Hollywood? What's my first step? What do I look to do?
I'd say work for free like I did, because people genuinely hire people who work for free. It's really hard to turn down an offer when somebody who's a college graduate who presents themselves well says, "I'm willing to work for free." Yeah, I mean, how do you say no to somebody like that? I worked for free for Sandy Howard for 6 months, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, I learned how to produce movies from Sandy Howard. I sat on his desk. He taught me. I watched him negotiate deals, good, bad, and indifferent. I watched him renegotiate deals, good, bad, and indifferent. I saw the importance of cash flow in a business. It's probably the single most important thing in any business, cash flow. Our economy is reeling with cash flow problems right now. So my advice would be, go to college. While you're in college, make sure you get as many free summer internships as you can with anyone associated in the business. Call up every talent agency, call up every movie studio, every TV production company, every network. Try and fill all your summers as an intern. And then when you're done, try and get another internship and just keep hanging around. And at one point, you'll become valuable and they'll have to pay you. There's no way a productive person, and let me underline that sentence, a productive person can sit in a business marketplace day in and day out for a few months and not become integral to it. So that then when you say, "I got a job that pays, I got to go leave." No, we need you here. You're the guy that does this. Now let me also answer that question oppositely. What should you never do if you're trying to work in this movie business? Never present yourself as a person who is not defined. Define yourself first before you present yourself. So here's how you will never get a job in the movie business. I'll do anything. I can do anything. I'm anybody that can do anything. Hire me for whatever you need. It'll never happen. You'll never get hired. Define yourself. Present yourself with definition.
Well, I think that's it. Thanks for stopping in, and thanks for chatting it up. And good luck on Saturday night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Don.
Bye-bye.